Hi guys, this is Allison from Youth Alive. Welcome. We're in our series today on evangelism tips. This is part 3, and we're talking about sharing the gospel with people from different cultures. Some ideas from this talk come from these sources. You know, our world today is culturally very diverse. And if we want to share our faith with people from different cultures and races, it can be a challenge. One of the best evangelists in history was a man called Paul. He actually wrote up to half of the New Testament. And one of his letters in the New Testament was called Corinthians, and it was written to a church in a place called Corinth. In that book, he gave tips on sharing your faith with people from other cultures. And I'm going to give you some of those tips right now. Paul's number one goal in sharing was to bring people to Jesus. He was willing to limit his freedom to share the gospel with other cultures. I'm going to give you 5 tips from Paul. 1, he said, I am a free man with no master, but I become a slave to everyone so I can win as many people as possible. What does that mean? It means he chose to limit his own rights and his own freedoms, his comforts, so he could connect with others. He tried not to offend people culturally. He was not watering down the truth. He was not sinning, and he was not accepting practices that the Bible calls wrong. But he was being flexible, and he was adapting his methods according to the group he was trying to reach. When you go fishing, you have the right bait for the right fish. The second tip he said is, when I'm with the Jews, I like to live like a Jew, to win the Jews. They are ruled by the law of Moses, but I am not. But I live by the law to win them. Paul would follow Jewish customs when he was with Jews. He ate what they ate. He followed their dietary laws. He didn't have to follow the law, but he chose to. I'm going to give you an example. He wanted to take a young man called Timothy on a mission trip with him. And that young man had a Gentile father, and he was not circumcised. But Paul had him circumcised to please the Jews. He wanted to remove barriers from the Jewish people so that they would listen to Timothy. Paul used the Old Testament to share his faith with the Jews because that's the part of the Bible that they accept. And they knew and respected the Bible. And so he tried to find common ground with the Jews. The next tip is, sometimes he worked with non-Jews. He said, when working with Gentiles, or non-Jews, I live like a Gentile, outside the Jewish law, in order to win the Gentiles. When he was with the Gentiles, he didn't follow the Jewish rules. He didn't follow the dietary laws. He ate what the Gentiles ate. He tried to fit in with the culture as best he could. When he was sharing with non-Jews, he would use their poetry. He would use religious objects he found in their culture to connect with them. He would not use the Old Testament because they didn't respect it. He tailored his approach to the group he was trying to reach. 4th tip. Sometimes he worked with those who were weak. Those were people who had very sensitive consciences. And he said, to those who are weak, I became weak so that I could help save them. These people who were weak would only eat vegetables. They would not eat meat that in that day was sacrificed to idols and then sold in the meat market. They would not eat that meat because they felt like it was not clean. And when Paul was with those people, he did not eat meat either. He gave up his meat, which he had a right to eat, but he wanted to fit in and he didn't want to have any obstacles to their faith. Fifth, he said, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. He was loving people and he was meeting them where they were at. And he was making it easier for them to hear the message. There was a man called Hudson Taylor back in the 1800s. He was a missionary to China. He was a British man from England, and he found that when he tried to dress as a Westerner, he didn't succeed very well. But when he started trying to change the way he looked and started wearing a pigtail, shaving the sides of his head, and living in a houseboat, as the Chinese did, he had much more success. He was fitting in with their culture. Perhaps you know a Muslim person. Did you know that eating pork offends them? So if we're with Muslims, for example, we could just say, oh, I'm not going to eat bacon in front of them. Doesn't mean you give up bacon for your whole life, but when you're in front of them, don't eat a ham sandwich when you're around them. Is it your goal to lead as many people to Christ as possible? Do you want to do this? Well, are you willing to sacrifice some of your freedoms so that you don't offend people? Are you willing to find common ground with those you want to reach? Are you willing to be sensitive to their culture? It'll be worth it. We will see lives changed for Jesus. Let's follow the tips of one of the most successful evangelists in history, and God will give us success too. Amen.